Sensitive people aren't always cut out for the hard-edged business side of the industry, the student debt, the workplace churn, the necessity of putting a beloved pet to sleep and comforting the owner one minute, then the next minute greeting another owner with a new puppy, as if nothing has just happened. And yet those are tasks we have to do all the time. It wasn't just the strains of the job that led me to contemplate suicide that day, though. It was a confluence of stressors. Professional, yes, but also financial, medical, and emotional. But as I'd stared at the ocean, I knew I had one of two choices. I could slam a bunch of pills I had in my pocket and walk myself into the waves, or I could walk myself to a hospital. I chose the hospital. 12 years later, I'd had another memorable encounter in almost exactly the same spot. I'd been in my 40s, and Mission Beach had become one of my regular spots to do my street work, my informal practice of treating animals of the homeless. I was walking around with Genesis, the vet tech who assisted me, when we met Don and his blind dachshund, Loka. Don had had a rough go from the moment he'd been diagnosed with cancer. Medical expenses and some financial mistakes caused him to lose his home, and he and Loka had been on the streets ever since. He was still pretty sick when I encountered him that day. He had lost not just his home, but his boat and his livelihood. He didn't talk about family, and I'm not sure he had any friends. But he wasn't staring out at the waves, wondering whether to end it all. He never would, because Loka needed him. Everything he did, every decision he made was for that dog. She was his world, and he was hers. I've heard similar stories in the years I've been involved in helping the homeless. Stories of people who have lost everything but their animal. People who have been ignored, derided, and who have made their share of mistakes, whether they be financial, chemical, or interpersonal. Again and again, I've heard of people living for the sake of their animal, how their animal has helped them heal. But there was something about Don and his blind pup that stayed with me more than all the others. Something memorable about the steely look in Don's eye that said, "It's hard, but we're survivors." Loka saved Don. And helping animals like Loka, and people like Don, would end up saving me. Chapter 1. Endless rows of cages. I just had time to close my office door before the room started spinning. I'd become familiar with what panic attacks felt like, and I had sensed one coming on moments ago while I was in the lobby surrounded by my staff. Thankfully, I made it to my office before any of them had seen. Sit, breathe. I felt for my desk chair, slumped down, and put my head in my hands. It's okay. You're okay. I looked down at the scuffed linoleum floor, trying to get my eyes to focus on its many cracks and stains. The door did little to muffle the din of the shelter. The dogs barking and crying, the cats howling, the brisk, commanding voice of my right-hand vet tech, Paisley, barking orders to the other techs. Breathe, focus, calm. It wasn't my first panic attack at the shelter, nor was it surprising, as it had been a day, and it was only 10 a.m. Mornings were always the worst. Some people start their workday with coffee and company-wide meetings. I started my workday by touring the kennels and deciding which animals had to be euthanized. So many animals. I had more than 400 in my care at any given time. Each morning I'd go on my rounds, Paisley beside me with a clipboard, and assess where we were. How many animals had come in? How many could we save? That morning my rounds had been brutal. I'd had to put 70 animals, many of them healthy, on the PTS or put to sleep list. I knew what the public around our clinic thought of us. The Stanislaus County Animal Shelter was 35 years old, but could have been 100. It looked like an old, creepy sanitarium, smelled like sewage, and had one of the highest euthanasia rates in the entire country. The paint was worn and the concrete cracked. There were few windows, and it was enclosed in old barbed wire fence, like a prison. We were a death house, and I was the death dealer in chief. Animal lovers made villains of us and gave their donations to no-kill shelters. What they didn't know is that those shelters had options we didn't have. They could take in the animals they knew for certain they could adopt out.